today I will be walking you through lighting and control, basically outlining the various applications and functions of theater lighting and entertainment lighting for events and corporate AV. So, without any further ado, we will dive right in to the origins of stage lighting and why we're kind of here right now. The earliest origins in lighting in theater date back to the Greek and Roman theater, where stages were constructed outdoors and they made use of natural lighting. The orientation of these outdoor stages were based on the seasonal light patterns, ideally such that the sun would kind of be behind the audience members and illuminating the performers. But as you can see in the image below or on the screen there, it's not always the case. Depending on the time of day, where the sun might be, obviously this had a big bearing on productions and what time of the year you would actually be able to use the space. Having theater outside would present the obvious challenges, the inclement weather being the primary one. And so eventually you'd started to see indoor theater become more and more commonplace. With indoor theater, the obvious problem is illumination. And initially, candlelight was the primary way of handling that and illuminating the indoors. But it comes with some pretty decent issues. Any source involving combustion is going to have byproducts, primarily soot, being produced and deposited into the air and onto surfaces. Also, candles consume oxygen, which a few in your house isn't going to be a big deal. But if you have several hundred in a tightly packed room with lots of people, it's going to potentially cause some issues. So we ended up seeing audience members either just becoming uncomfortable with the low oxygen saturation levels, or even losing consciousness in certain instances. The other thing with candles is, because of gravity, they burn upright, and placement has to be carefully considered. Generally, it's going to be limited to chandeliers or footlights. So in the image there, you can kind of see the performer kneeling in the stage, and then the footlights in front of him with a simple reflector behind the candle. Candlelight, you're going to see a lot of use of these reflectors to try and enhance and redirect the light in a very rudimentary way. Candlelit theaters are going to persist throughout the 18th century, but oil lanterns at one point are also introduced somewhere around the 1600s onward with different levels of adoption. A great example, if you're interested in seeing this type of theater, is the Sam Wanamaker Playhouse, which is right next door to the Globe Theatre in London. And they endeavored to create a space that would be true to form for a candlelit theater. So the only illumination is all natural candles. They have a state-of-the-art ventilation system to handle all of the off-gassing and recycle the air, as well as a number of fire measures that I was looking at, researching it online. But yeah, if you ever wanted to see like a real life example of it, they're pretty true to form. So candles kind of gave way to gas lanterns, oil lanterns, which you'd see around the 1600s onward. An issue with lanterns and candles is the constant attention that these things need. You would always have to adjust the wicks. You'd have to relight them if they became extinguished, replace the fuel, whether that's the wax for the candle or the oil for the lantern. So intermission would become a time for your theater workers to go throughout the venue and relight, readjust, and trim wicks as needed. So gaslight comes around in the 1800s. It's coal-derived gas, and it was the first system that really allowed any sort of refined control over the intensity of the illumination, because you can increase the flow of gas to get brighter lights from the little jets that are ignited, or you can decrease that and reduce it. It would also give you kind of a sense of remote control, because you could at least remotely extinguish them by placing the valves in different places that technicians could have access to. It also offers a bunch more options for placement, whereas candles, you're pretty limited to the candelabras and the chandeliers and placement like that. With a gas jet, you can kind of build it into its own fixture and use a number of different locations that wouldn't necessarily be available with a oil lantern or a candle. Um, Gas systems of the time, though, are you're still facing the problem with a combustion source, right? So you still have the soot that's going to build up, maybe a little bit less because you're not burning natural fiber wicks, you're not burning wax, but you're still, it's still combustion, so there's byproducts. They consume oxygen a bit more readily than your traditional lanterns and your candles. The other thing to consider with the coal gas systems of the time is that the pressure in those systems were much, much lower than a modern day natural gas system. And what that would mean is that leak detection was a little bit more complicated. You wouldn't necessarily hear a hissing leak because it would just be kind of billowing out and at a low pressure. It would displace oxygen in the atmosphere. People would suffocate. And of course, it would be an inherent risk of fire in addition to the asphyxiation risk because, a room could easily fill up with coal gas and then somebody walks in with a lit match or a candle and the rest is kind of history there. Um, Coal gas kind of gave way to more modern use of like hydrogen and oxygen and different things like that to make these torches. But one innovation that has kind of stuck with us, at least in name only, is the use of calcium oxide or lime as an incandescent material. Limelight is an improvement on just straight up coal gas light. Because gaslight, of course, is limited in the brightness. You can only get so much out of a jet of gas. Better than a candle, but still not that bright. But they found if you use the gaslight to heat a piece of calcium oxide or lime or quicklime, the mineral glows with this intense brightness that was just superior to the traditional gas alone. And that's where you get the phrase limelight or, standing in the limelight. Because this piece of calcium oxide would incandesce. It would heat up and start to glow, which became the de facto method of illumination